This is Being in Time, video 6B. Notice I still said we're still in video 6, so I'm not actually lying. And I'm still Ammon. In our last video, or in the first half of this video, we had gotten Hegel scholars mad at me when I had compared the phenomenology of spirit ending to The Bachelor by insisting that the thesis is not as important as the journey to get to it. The thesis on its own looks pretty empty, and it's only when you understand concretely how it's all worked out that there's anything going on there. It's something similar here when Heidegger is saying that the preliminary aim of the whole book is to understand time as the horizon for any possible understanding of being. Well, yes, in that, the thesis probably doesn't tell us what makes the book important, the many discussions that are going to go into it. But no, in that it's not going to be sort of a matter of understanding the whole journey. It's really going to be a matter, and this is why I've been emphasizing it, in understanding or in sort of reawakening what it would mean to ask the question of the meaning of being at all. And with that in mind, I want to sort of notice what I think is going to be one of the keys to understanding the whole text. This is going to be a thing that sort of in its most trivial form, I think most Heidegger scholars will agree with me on. But I'm going to insist that actually when people actually get down to the nitty gritty of interpreting Heidegger, this ends up causing people problems in all sorts of ways. And that's just to notice very straightforwardly, nowhere in this, either in his aim or in his provisional aim, does Heidegger say that his purpose is actually to answer the question of the meaning of being. To provide a proper or true answer is going to turn out, I think, to be, or is going to turn out to be totally impossible. There's going to be lots of answers to the question of the meaning of being, but it's not going to be that all of them are true. I think this is a problem that sort of constructivism in its sort of worst and sort of most stereotypical forms runs into. It's going to be that none of them is really adequate to what the question is trying to ask. So we're going to have lots of answers, and those answers are going to be appropriate to different time periods, et cetera, different ways of looking at problems, but they're also all going to fail, right? That's going to be very important. So the thesis is sort of going to be a meta thesis here about a feature that all of these failed answers have. And that's that they all in some way depend upon an understanding of time. That's going to be a really important point. But what that means, that's going to be, I think, what the book is, and frankly, a lot of Heidegger's philosophy is really trying to work out. A common tagline here is to say that being is not a being, right? And that's going to be, not only is that going to be sort of super important understanding Heidegger, and I think widely accepted, but I think it's going to be something that the severity with which Heidegger's going to want to say this, I think, is not necessarily always appreciated. So broadly, and throughout these videos, we're going to talk a lot about what's going to get called the ontological difference, this idea that when we're talking about being, right, with the question of the meaning of being, that's not answerable by referring to any particular being. That said, we're going to find that from the very beginning of the history of philosophy, people are going to try to find shortcuts and ruses to try to nonetheless provide an answer. So we're going to, even in this first section, we're going to see Heidegger talk about transcendentals and reject that. But I think a lot of, there's scholars who miss the point that he's rejecting it. And in his later career, he's going to start to do different kinds of strategies. He's going to write being with a Y. He's going to cross out being. And to be frank, I think a lot of times, even when people are sort of working in Heidegger, although they know that they sort of are going to end up thinking that these are ways to, if not answer the question of the meaning of being, really work being into some sort of, well, not thing, but, je ne sais quoi, but really, for real, I really don't know what. And I think the bigger point isn't going to be to try to sort of imagine some sort of thing beyond thingliness, but to understand that there's going to be some way in which, even though the question of the meaning of being is going to be incredibly important for Heidegger and broach all sorts of things, thinking that one can answer it, or thinking that being actually refers to anything that Heidegger is trying to sort of give a thesis on, is going to be to fundamentally miss what's going on. No matter how clever you want to get with your strategies of crossing out the name, writing it with a Y, writing it, as Jacques Derrida will say, under erasure, it's not that those things aren't valuable, but it's going to miss the point if we don't understand that at bottom, I think in Heidegger, and this is going to sort of not be something that everyone's going to agree with, there's a deep nominalism. There is a world. There's lots of ways that we understand the world. And as we try to understand the world, we're going to find that we take certain shortcuts, that we're going to find that there's certain patterns, certain signatures, certain overarching structures. And those patterns, structures, etc., are going to be ways of answering the question of the meaning of being, but it's not like Heidegger's trying to sort of get the best one of those answers or even to adjudicate between different possible answers at all. The point is that all of these are going to in some way reflect a failure to grasp the initial question. And here's where the thesis does become relevant. The way that they're going to fail to grasp it is going to have a lot to do with an inability to understand time, and as we're going to see, is particularly our own temporal nature. That question, and what the hell does it have to do with the Greeks? And does thinking that has nothing to do with the Greeks lead us into some sort of Eurocentrism, even though it's going to be a little weird to even call the Greeks Europeans? These are going to be some of the questions I'm going to try to take up in our last video on the thesis.